So I'm going to give you a quick tour of ArcGIS Online and how we can do various things with ArcGIS Online. So when you first log in, you have a creator account. So this training is for if you're a publisher and if you have a creator account. The first thing I'm going to tell you is a little bit about the ArcGIS Online organization. This account that I have, the kind of account that you've been given, makes you part of an organization. This is the name of it. mass-eoeea.maps is kind of the relevant part of that URL that tells you which organization you're part of. 6 agencies in the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. That's what EOEA is. 6 agencies share this account. This includes DP, Department of Agricultural Resources, Fish and Game, DFG, EA and on its whole, DCRW, and CZM, and a number of, I don't know if I hit all 6, but there's 6 agencies. Well, actually, it's right there. CZM, DCR, DP, Fish and Game, DAR. I think I did hit them all, and EOEA itself. DCR is broken up into just DCR, that's us, and DCR for Water Resources, which is Eric Teft is the organizer, is the coordinator there. So each one of these agencies that share this organization has an appointed ArcGIS Online AGOL administrator. I'm the one for DCR, so I'm kind of responsible for managing all the people whom I onboard and whose accounts that I create and I manage under in this organization. And I forget what the last count is, probably somewhere up 150, 160 people we have. We share this space, and what that means is we have a certain pool of licenses that we pay for every year. And that's the pool from which I give licenses to people as and when they need it. I take it back when they are done. I kind of manage that whole thing on the whole. There's a system of credits. So with our annual subscription to this system, we have a pool of licenses. We also have, their credits are almost like tokens, like when you go to the arcade and you buy, and where we use up tokens as an ArcGIS Online user is for storage of data sets that we put in there, for certain things like doing analysis online, which really, if you have access to ArcPro, a lot of that is something that most people try to do on the desktop because, of course, that's free and much more powerful. And then other things like, say, geocoding. If you have a spreadsheet full of addresses and you add that to ArcGIS Online, you can put it through through a geocoding step and it'll turn it into data. It's going to cost you an arm and leg in credits. And we sometimes get into trouble when we have large data sets. And because, as you can see, we have so many neighbors in this agency that we'll hit our credit limit and now everyone's frozen because somebody chewed through their credit. So that's kind of something to be a little aware of. When I create an account for you, I actually set a cap on the number of credits that you can personally use. So in some ways, you're a little protected that you can't accidentally do a lot of analysis. But I believe your storage credits can kind of, the counter can keep ticking behind the scenes. So one of the things that I'm going to tell you in onboarding, and it bears repeating, so I'll tell you right in the beginning, is if and when you publish data into ArcGIS Online, initially you want to maybe just work with me so I can give you an idea of what is an appropriate time, what isn't, and give you some idea on data development. Because if you have data sets that are threatening to get really large, because some of the best data sets are, right, they grow every year, we usually I try to help you come up with a plan for it. Maybe you archive it once a year and reset the online thing to be blank. Maybe if you really do need to see all of it, we find a different place to host it so that you can still access it. I'm going to say 99% of the times it's not an issue. It's not such like the data, and even in the scheme of that, point data sets consume very little space. It's really the lines, because they have all the vertices in each line, and polygons, which is made up of multiple lines, and they have lots and lots of little points, vertices that make up each line. So that's kind of your lay of the land. Let's see. I've, let me just see what I want to talk about next. I'm going to still talk to you about, I'm going to give you a bit of okay, the next thing is the type of accounts. Um, uh, I'm going to just to give you a quick overview. The only thing that's relevant to know is that accounts are broken up into user types and user roles. And under user types, we have this escalating scale, the lowest of which is viewer, where if you have a viewer kind of an account, all you can see is online apps or data that we've made for you or that somebody's made for you. Editors, where you can see it and edit it. These are the two most common kinds of uh, accounts that you're likely to work with. One is the mobile worker account, where you can view and edit data and maps that have been shared with you. But you cannot make your own maps. You cannot publish your own data into ArcGIS Online. For that, you need pretty much one of the highest levels of accounts you have, which is creator. You're doing this training because it's a creator level training because you have a creator account. So that's your user type. So your user type, you have a creator account. It also happens to be the most expensive kind of account because, of course, it's power loaded, right? Once you do get an account, you also have something called a role. The role is really each account also has micro settings that lets you do more or less things. It's less important what it says over here. In our organization, all the administrators put together, we have made our own set of custom roles. So I happen to know yours, I believe, is an internal publisher. And at this point, I'm going to give you a quick look at how the sausage is made. This is how I monitor all the users that I have. This is the plan for all of DCR. And if we zoom out, you'll see it's divided into different groups. The program, so for instance, you would fall under natural resources and inland ecology, is that right? Yep. So your group is natural resources, and this is just for me to organize myself. You fall under the ecology program. The status of your account is that I've created it. That's your account ID, that's your name, that's your email. This is the role that you've been given. This is the kind of account you've been given. I gave you a creator account, and this is the type of publisher light. Some people have something called internal publisher, which I forget what it is. I think one of them lets you make a group, another one doesn't. If you ever find that you're restricted and you need to bump up, it's one click for me, and I'll bump you up. I just tend to bring people in to start with on the publisher light level, and then I tweak up as needed. Um, this is how I track what's going on in this whole office, and I decide how to give who accounts. Some people share accounts, and in that case, the account gets created here, it's flagged as being shared, and it also gets entered here one more time so that I can track at any point. So if you ever do become somebody who manages a shared account, it's going to be really important that you let me know at any one point in time who has access to that account. Because using shared accounts is pretty nuanced and can get me into quite a lot of trouble because, as you can tell, all it takes is for one person to accidentally change the password and they've locked out everybody else. Somebody could be in the field, somebody else could, multiple projects could be sharing, but I try to keep a really close eye. Like before I even give somebody access to a shared account, I'll check with anybody else who's in that account, what the project's being used for, privacy issues. But just so you know, because I'm sure that in your time working with ArcGIS Online, you're gonna come across this. The other reason I wanted you to show this is to also demonstrate that at any one point in time, it's not unlikely that you'll be operating multiple ArcGIS Online accounts. You could be entering as you, the account that's specific to you, to do certain tasks and certain projects. And if you're part of some other project that's data, like say the wetlands delineation that you mentioned, there's already a project going for that. And there are different contractors and other staff members who are part of that project. And they're using a certain other login, which isn't a creator, it's a mobile worker. So when you edit data for wetlands delineation, instead of me giving you the creator access to that project set, which I could, it might actually be easier for you to just switch hats log out as you and log in as that other account. Just because you're going to get everything that you need. Um, and then the system's going to record who entered and did it. And it's going to be that hat. It won't be you. So there are some users who wear up to 5 hats. They have access up to 5 accounts and they just have to switch based on. So it's a slightly schizophrenic kind of a aspect of ArcGIS Online, but it also is very powerful. So that's the kind of accounts, roles. One of the biggest things, like I said, that one of the things that bears repeating is the whole idea of credits and usage of credits. One of the biggest things is whenever you publish data, not to duplicate data, find data that lives out there initially. And so I'm going to get to that when we talk about publishing. The other thing that's worth knowing is that, so this is me, I'm your administrator, and this is my account ID. But there's another account, ArcGIS Online account that I run called DCRS State Parks. That is the official account for the DCR GIS office. So there could be time in your work when a specific data set that you have published and developed and taken from zero to something that's really fully baked and reliable. And the term for it is authoritative when it's kind of grown up and become an adult, and it's reliable and it's fairly well developed. And now it's kind of in maintenance mode in that tweaks will keep happening over the years, but the bulk of it has been developed. When it reaches that stage and it's considered fully matured, if you feel like that is a data set that is worth sharing with the rest of the organization, or at least there's different levels of sharing. You can share it with all of DCR staff. Maybe it's something that would be useful to add to the stewardship map, for instance, because other people could see it. We could hide certain sensitive fields and show most of them. Or you want to make it public so that anybody in the world should be able to access it. At that point, remember to have a talk with me. What we can always do is change ownership of that data from you, who's, a certain DCR staff member, over to that account so that when people look for it online, it won't be coming so when this happens to me and I have fully baked data that's out there for anybody to find in the world, I won't publish it from Chandra_EEA because who am I? Why would people trust me? I switch ownership to the official account and I stamp it as being authoritative data, and that's how it goes out into the world. So you should know that when you're, and it's possible your data will never be that way. It'll always be for internal use. Even then, if it ever reaches a point where it is relevant to people beyond your office and your project, consider having that conversation with me so we can see if it fits into the whole range of data that the DCR puts out there. And it just means that you've done a service to the whole agency. It means your data is getting more validation, getting more eyes, getting used. So I think that's all I have about accounts and types of accounts right now. And again, a reminder, if you ever hit limits to what you can do with the account that I have given to you, just ping me and let's see if maybe I can bump up your role. Maybe there's something that I can tweak. There's a lot more I can do. Most of the time you'll be fine with what I've given you, but you should know that you should not feel limited. The next thing is I'm going to talk about something called the ArcGIS Online Pyramid, which is a phrase that I believe I have coined. I'm not sure. And the place to find it is from the DCR GIS hub site, which is a good time for me to plug this as well. You are probably familiar with this. This is the address for it. I'm going to copy it and drop it into a chat with you, just in case you don't have it. You probably do have it. This is, it's created in using a kind of application called a hub application. And it's almost like the homepage for the DCR GIS office where you can get a lot of resources. A quick tour of it is at the main page, which is this tab over here. I of course use it to message you because stuff goes down all the time. It's got a lot of apps that people use on a regular basis. Some require specific credentials. If it does, it'll tell you who you can contact for it. And some are public, like the stewardship map. If you have not checked that one out, I would highly recommend you do so. It samples all the data for It assembles all of data that is relevant to DCR. This next page is also very useful. It has some help documents and how-to documents. Esri Collector has now no longer being supported. It was the old app that was used for data collection. We have now pivoted fully to field maps, so you get a lot of resources on how to use it online, how to use it offline. And this is for the user guide. So it doesn't tell you how to set up a project to be used. It does tell you, though, how to be a user of it, and steps you through all of that. This little section here is really important for publishers like yourself, or creator type. I'm calling you a publisher because that's like the supremest power you can have. The reason this is important is that whenever you publish a data set to ArcGIS Online, it has to be branded with the DCR logo and it has to be filled out a certain way. You will find, if you follow the instructions here in SharePoint, you'll have access to PowerPoints that help you kind of make those cool little images that we really need, that we're required to have. As somebody who's starting the process, I would highly recommend that you watch this quick little self-guided tour. It's a presentation that I've done at many conferences before, but it kind of summarizes the whole soup to nuts process of how to develop ArcGIS Online projects in the best possible way. It's kind of the standard operating procedure that I've developed for DCR, and you can just click through the slides, and I've made it so that you can just read it to yourself, and it will hopefully make sense. When we get to data development, I'm going to walk you through the schema document, which is also a specific operating procedure that I've developed, which has been adopted by many people, and it really does a good job of guiding you through data development. But the reason I was here is I want to show you the pyramid and get started on data development. I'm going to complete my quick tour of the hub site by taking you next to the GIS projects tab, which I want to plug this for you, that when you start assembling your projects, this is a place where if we have GIS solutions that we provide for any of the different offices in DCR, sometimes it'll generate a lot of links, a lot of different maps, a lot of different apps and documents. This is a place where I can assemble that easily for you. A good example is, say, the Cultural Resources Inventory maybe project that started in 2021. They have a certain workflow. They have a step 1 where they have to enter points from their desktop using this map, right? So I put the link in there for them. Now, it's only, this is credentialed, so only people who have AGOL IDs for this project will be able to access it. So even though it's there and you can see it and I can see it, no one can access it. But it's your little space that I create for you, so everything's in one place. Step 2, they enter points from their mobile device, and it's just got the name, because of course you can't click here and go to the mobile device. Step 3 is they finish up with another second app, an online map, and they can click here to do that. Part of this project is knowing what their schema is. Here's a link to that document, which is in SharePoint. Here are manuals to help them do the work. Here's a video that shows them how to do the work. Here's a guide to some of the basic tools. It tells you who the contact is and who the GIS person is. So if you get to the point where you've got a lot of moving parts and it would help you to have one place to organize things, just contact me or contact David Kimple in our office. Both of us are able to get it going. You can see there's a number of cards here. Some are smaller than others. Some are more, like this is all there is for this one. Some are, yeah, there's whatever you need, but it's a way to help you organize yourself. There's no reason why you can't do this in SharePoint, but this is just really easy to do. It's easy to get to. It's graphic. And then last but not least, this is something I just started. I need to build it out more, but it's kind of an inspiration vision board, right? Where right now it only shows story maps that have been developed in public, anything that's public. So you should not need credentials to get into any of this. Story maps are a kind of ArcGIS Online product that helps you tell a story. It's kind of like PowerPoint, but geographically and geospatially enabled. So that's what this is. And I'm going to build it out so it also has other public applications. I just haven't had the time for that yet. But so that's your quick tutorial here. I'm going to shift gears into the whole process of data development. Sorry, I'm just going to consult my notes just for a second. Um, yep. I'm going to skip this whole thing. I'm going to ask you to take yourself through it later on and ask me if you have any questions. Do you have any questions at this point? I can pause the recording and take it if you'd like. So a question came up about ARC Pro and whether the kind of credit costs and credit usages I've been outlining apply. And the answer is pretty much no. ARC Pro is desktop software that you have purchased and that has no expense except for whatever the behind the scenes annual subscription fees that we have. Um, if you have analysis or high-level cartography to do, ARC Pro still remains the primary way to do it. It's worth saying here that ArcGIS Online, which is what this tutorial is about, is it was developed as a light version of Pro. Uh, Arc Arc Pro is actually the latest in the evolution of what's called desktop GIS. Esri makes desktop GIS, which is very high-end software, GIS software that has a learning curve that takes, train people to really make the most of it. And the decision tree for when to do something in ArcGIS Online versus Arc Pro goes something like this. If you have high quality cartography that you need, it's Arc Pro with lots of labels, with beautiful layouts, with beautiful effects. If you need to do high level analysis or really even mid level analysis, Arc Pro is where you go because it's got tremendous, tremendous power. There's a great deal you can do in ArcGIS Online. Some of it will come at a cost. The reason that you pivot to ArcGIS Online is ArcGIS Online takes very little training. So it's a way to be able to kind of democratize GIS to some level and roll it out to many users who do not have the time to actually learn about or to kind of figure out how to do things in ArcPro. The other huge advantage of ArcGIS Online is that you can create solutions where all it takes to see a map is an internet browser and a login. And of course, the biggest of them all is interactivity, right? Whereas Whereas desktop GIS gives you static maps, ArcGIS Online can create products that you can engage with, zoom in, zoom out, do special functions. So that's kind of how it goes. And the two speak to each other. Or rather, you can be an Arc Pro on your desktop doing the complicated work, and you can work with data that actually lives in ArcGIS Online. And that is a really good segue to the next part that I'm going to talk about, which is the GIS pyramid. And this is kind of that crosswalk between Pro and Arc Pyramid and ArcGIS Online. Where is it here? Something here, the pyramid. Here it is. And I always actually opens up in a very funny way, and the formatting is not great. One day I will update it, but hopefully it's enough. Feel free to see this. This is kind of my attempt at summarizing how data works. So if you have anything but the simplest, you are, okay, let's start this again. You are able to build GIS data from scratch within ArcGIS Online. But ideally, if you have any kind of nuance to your data set, like for instance, if you have a data field that has, if you want to create a pick list for it, domains, it's easier in some ways to start at an Arc Pro. If you have something more sophisticated, like say a related table, where one feature in a geographic feature class has a connection to a table in which it can have multiple records. That's called a one-to-many relationship in a relationship class. That is more complex data architecture, which is best done in Arc Pro. So ideally, your data starts on the desktop. It starts life at the bottom to me, that's the bottom of the pyramid because I'm a GIS specialist and Arc Pro is really most of my life. What you do at that point, if you decide that it needs to be an ArcGIS Online because you need access to the ArcGIS Online suite of things, is that step is called publishing the data. And when you publish the data, it's fairly easy. There's this I'm not going to cover it here, but really, it's you can read online help, and there's a couple of when I write the document for this, I'll have a couple of tips, and I might as well say it now. You basically create your data. You write if it's just one data layer that you're publishing, you right click on it and you share it, and you share it as a web layer. But before you do that, you go to the group, to the frame in Arc Pro, and it probably is worth demonstrating. It's easier than actually um, talking about it. Uh, the two settings that you need to think about is your coordinate system before you publish. Your coordinate system, if you're publishing something to be consumed in ArcGIS Online, you're better off going with Web Mercator projection, which projects your data more accurately, makes it work more accurately with other data layers in ArcGIS Online. The caveat, the thing to remember about that is if ever you want to do um, calculations such as area or area of a polygon or lines. I'm just going to open that one. What you need to do then is you need to download the data so that it's back in the world of Arc Pro with the high-end tools, and you need to reproject it to Mass State Plane Mainland NAT 83, which is the Massachusetts projection, and then your calculations are just going to be more accurate. So any kind of spatial analysis that's significant, that's where you would do it. This is an example of a map I have. So if, say, this data set, for instance, it's a two-part data set. I have polygons and I have polylines. If I wanted to just publish this as a data layer in ArcGIS Online, I would right-click. I would go to sharing. I would say share as a web layer. I'm going to show you that in a second, but before that, I would go to the map frame. I would go to its properties, and the two things to check on here is the coordinate system. That's the one you want. And that's one thing. The second thing is you want this to be checked on. Allow assignment of unique numeric IDs for sharing web layers. This allows you, once you publish the data one time, if you make major change, you can, once you publish it, it's going to go exist in ArcGIS Online. And in ArcGIS Online, you can get to tweak it more. You can add fields, you can add pick lists, but there are certain things that are hard or impossible to do in ArcGIS Online. For instance, if you decide later on that you need to add a relationship class and create a related table, it's extremely hard to do, or it's not that easy to do ArcGIS Online. I believe it can be done. I've never done it. Really, what you would want to do is you would come back to where your main data set is, where you saved it on your desktop or in SharePoint, and then do it there. You would, or if you're not the one who did it, or if you don't have it anymore, you can just download the data set as it is in ArcGIS Online, because once you publish it, since then maybe you've added 5,000 points into it. So you really want the latest and the greatest. You would download it, it would be on your desktop, you would change whatever needs to be changed about its architecture. And this time when you publish, instead of saying sharing and then web share as layer package, you would overwrite the web layer. And that way, the layer that you already had in ArcGIS Online, the content simply get replaced. And that's really useful because you could have added that layer into other maps, and that way you won't have to replace them. It's just the changes that you make are automatically gonna show up. So that's pretty much all there is to it. If you have, so this particular data layer is a DCR regions, and it's actually a two-part data set. It's polygons. Those are the polygons, and then the lines. So when I publish this, I want to publish this as two data layers in one. So what you do for that is you make sure that these are the only two data layers in this map frame. There's nothing else in there. Now I would, on this level, I would go up to sharing, and I would say web layer, publish web layer. And similarly, if I was overwriting, I would say overwrite. And the screen is the same whether you do it for one versus two. And the thing you want to pay attention to before you hit it from there, you want to pay attention to what this is named. because that's how it's going to show up once you publish it. And then you get to tweak some things about it, but some stuff gets baked in at this level. You want to pay attention to what you've named it here. So you go to properties and you rename it. And then the last thing, which I think may have changed, but it's just a safety measure that I take, is make sure that there's a create template that's been set for it. And all you have to do for that is you have to go for each one of these. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to go in there and make sure that there is a template for it. There it is. That's the border. And usually just clicking on this makes it happen. If for some reason you don't see it, you might have to say new template for layer or something. You can look at online help, and that's what lets this layer become editable later. I believe it's not the end of the world if you skip this step. I think you're able to do it in ArcGIS Online too, but there's only like these 3 things that to me are things that I try to remember when I do this. So that's what this is. The other thing is if you are intending to enable attachments, that's something you can do from here. Again, not the end of the world. This is something you can do in ArcGIS Online, but when you're doing it here, you would come to your catalog pane, you would go to your data set, and this is your file geodatabase. You would go to this level, you would right click, go to manage. Oops, sorry, not there. You would go there and, actually I don't own this, so I think that's why I'm not able to do it. But you would basically, I think you need to go to manage and then you're able to, maybe it's in, I'm sorry, it's in data designs, I think. Oh dear, I'm not sure where it went, but you can enable attachments from here. And then I'm going to do a quick example of what it looks like when you go to publish as a web layer, not a layer package, a web layer. There's this handy little wizard that shows up. And you want to step through it. You want to give it a name, summary tags. Again, all of this can be created after the fact. You can pick which folder in your ArcGIS Online content you're going to put it in. You will, under configuration, you want to visit this place here and decide this. Again, you can change this after you've published it. This is not a, it just kind of helps you get a step up. Come back over here. This is for time. No, this is actually, sorry, this is not relevant. I never do anything with this. Here is where you can set the time. The UTC is a uniquely GIS, online GIS form of tracking time. You can have none, or I just tend to default it to computer time. I'm not sure it makes a huge difference to do it. It's just something I've gotten into the habit of doing. This shows you what it's going to look like when you publish it. So remember how I said this name matters? This is going to be the main data set. And then this one is going to be called region borders. And let's see how this would change if we did both of these together and did publish web layer from there. Nope, I don't want to dump that one. I'm just going to take you straight to the content and show you that this is the name that it gets from the frame. And then this layer is going to be a 2-part layer. It's going to have that one, which is this one, and they'll have DCR region. So yeah, and then you're pretty much going to analyze it and see if there's any problems. And if it flags some problems, you'll take care of that. You can right click and it'll give you suggestions for what to do, or you can look it up online, or you can contact someone in our office, and then you hit publish. And at that point, I'm going to shut this down because I think we're done with this. So that's the point where you have converted your data from GIS data and it's gone into ArcGIS Online. And at that point, it's called a hosted feature layer. We call it a hosted feature layer, but when it's written, the hosted comes at the end in parentheses. And what that is basically the ArcGIS Online version of the GIS data. It's important to note that at this point, these 2 data sets are disconnected from each other. So this is what you started with. It's almost like, now after the pandemic, we have this idea of RNA. So this is the RNA. This is like the basic skeleton and the structure of your data set. Once you've done it, it lives as an entity in ArcGIS Online. This is the Internet of Things. So it's really literally a series of zeros and ones and JSON code or whatever. The feature layer has a unique URL. So it lives in the internet in ArcGIS Online as a unique URL, which is why that override thing now makes sense, right? Like if you make changes, and so once it's there, you can edit, you can put more data in it, you can change things about it. Now, if you have to make kind of a really big, major schema edit, a schema change is when you change the architecture in a significant way. You obviously don't want to work with the one that I just showed you because that didn't have anything in it. You want to work with the latest and greatest. So what you do is you would download it from ArcGIS Online so that it goes back to the native Pro, the real GIS format. And now you can work with it in Pro. And now when you go to you make all the changes. Now when you publish, you do an overwrite so that this layer gets replaced, but the URL stays the same. And that becomes relevant of what I'm going to say next, is once you've created a feature layer, you can then add a feature layer to Web Maps, which is an online map. A web map in ArcGIS Online can be consumed in primarily two ways. One is mobile apps directly consume web maps. So if you're working with Survey 123, if you're working with field maps, you need to set up a web map to be able to work with it in with mobile apps. And of course, the web map is where you pull in your editable data. Sometimes you pull in data that is for reference, that lives in the background, that you need in order to do your field work. So you can have other feature layers in there. A web map, in addition to being used in a mobile app, can also go into other web applications. So the analogy I like to give is, like, I like to think of the web map as the spaghetti. Like if you think of the spaghetti in a box of spaghetti, and the web app is actually the box with the cellophane window in it. And through it, you can see the map inside it. Usually you can see the linguine or the angel hair pasture through the window. That's your web app. And through it, you can see the web map. Web apps are sometimes the end result of your process, but web maps can also go into each other. For instance, a story map can have a web map embedded in it. So it kind of all builds up together, right? It all starts with the feature layer. Some of it could be feature layers that you have published and you own. Some of it could be web layers that other people have published and you consume it. The web map can go into there should be a bunch of different apps here. This web map can go into 5 web maps at the same time and be used for different purposes. It kind of goes outwards, like the tree. It's like a reverse pyramid. At that point, really, in this graphic, the pyramid should flip. So the whole thing should really look more like an hourglass. So that's kind of, I wanted to give an overview of where we are in the world of data through the pyramid. The other interesting thing to know about a hosted feature layer, if you're going to be publishing data, is that there's kind of 3 kind of flavors of hosted feature layers. One is its native generic format, the basic data that you edit with, that you work with, that you, the owner, are the only person who can initially see it, right? You're the person. But sometimes you want other people to see it. And there's 2 different levels of people you want to see. Sometimes you want someone to see it and edit it, right? Because maybe you're the one who's made that web map that everyone's going to go out in the field and do work with. In that case, you want to give them that basic editable parent layer, right? We're not using the word master layer data anymore, but parent data. But you may actually want to make a version of this data that's for anybody and everybody in the world to look at, or anybody in our organization to look at, or a certain group of people to look at. What you can do at that point is you can make a view of that hosted layer. And views are super cool in that you can actually turn off editing in that view. And that view will actually be connected to this parent data layer. So whatever changes a new point gets added, the view is going to show the new point. The point gets deleted, the view is going to show it. A new pick list value gets added to the main data, the view is going to show it. The contents of the attribute changed, the view is going to show it. But what you can do is you can symbolize the view differently. You can do the pop-ups, like when you click on a feature and you see that little pop-up. That can be done differently for the view as it is for the main data layer. And the best of all is you can hide certain fields. So when we make data layers public, we almost always, like we have legal implications, there are some fields that we're not supposed to show, right? Because they're internal or they're changing, and they can be giving away privacy details for people. So that's what a view is. A layer is kind of a step under a view, and it's basically where I have a certain feature layer and I find myself using it really often in maps, but I find that I almost always want to add it to the map three times. Once it's symbolized on one field, another time it's symbolized on a second field, because maybe those three symbologies work together in a certain way. If I find and so I can pull this layer into a map and then change the symbology. But if I know that I'm going to keep doing this and I have to do it 100 times, at that point I can make a layer and save the symbology with the layer. Now remember, the layer is also kind of like the spaghetti box, and it's looking at the spaghetti inside it. Let's pivot analogies to candy wrapper. It's a cellophane candy wrapper, and through it you can see whether it's butterscotch or a star mint or whatever, because it's a smaller scale than pasta. Must be hungry. It's all food today. So that's what that is. And they can be super useful if you find yourself doing something over and over again. You can also set filters on a layer to say, just don't show me, like if it's a a polygon data layer, don't show me polygons that are spread before a certain date, and whatever. So that's what those two are. And I think that's kind of all I want to say about the pyramid over here. One second, I just want to go back to um, yeah, the what I'm not going to cover in this training is the fieldwork portion of it. Um, I encourage you to get back to me if you do need to be the designer of fieldwork. Um, the kind of pyramid or sequence for that is before, and I think it's probably worth mentioning right now, is we have this document, the schema document, that is extremely important to this process. I encourage you to look through it. There's a guy, and I think there's a video, I believe there's a video here that gives you to see a video of the arc-pi methods. But it's a video of me explaining to people how to use the schema document. So I highly encourage you to give that a watch. I'm going to do a quick dime tour of it because it's just so important to our process. And as you can see, I've tried to make it so it's a self-guided tour. You can just read through it. It's pretty easy. But it's a place where if you are starting an ArcGIS Online project or data collection project, it behooves you to start at this point. And this is not how you have to develop it, but I've done so many of these. I've put examples of how I've done it. So for instance, I had a project where I think it was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12 data sets had to be created. So it was really, I was going nuts trying to figure out which one's doing what, and it really helped in the spread. I have one planning spreadsheet for every project. And it helped to see how all the data layers work together. Here's what the descriptions were. Here's what we were doing. How is the ID format going to do? Are we going to be taking photos? With this one is going to be optional. With this ones we need to. Are we going to be referring to records to fill it out? Is most of the work in the field or the desk? These are the things that mattered to me to organize my project. Here's another different project where we had to do some brainstorming to figure out the data architecture, right? Is this going to be just and so I tested two different models. Model one was a flat one where everything lived in one attribute table. And because it was a lot of the time you develop data for me, right? Because I'm not a subject matter expert, I'm doing solutions for other people. I don't understand what lighting load centers mean. So I understood the language and the jargon, how everything works. And it's all, even for somebody like you who is a subject matter expert, this is an extremely valuable tip because it helps you game out all the different scenarios that could happen. So I got together with a expert and I said, so what are the different combinations that this data can exist in? And we actually did some schematics to say, oh, okay, and these are three different data sets that are talking to each other. And until we did the graphic, we didn't realize how many nuances there were. So that led me to say, well, let me give you another model to test drive. And this one has a relationship class where instead of all these attributes living on one level, some of them live in the point data, and then some of them would be in the table so that you could continue to do it over time. And for each one of them, we listed out pros and cons, and we created them and we test drove them to see which one worked. So this is my modeling sheet. I have so many permutations on this. Yours could look like something that's completely different than mine, but I highly recommend you have a place to put down your thoughts. And for the simplest reason that 6 months after you first develop the project, or 1 year later, or when a new person comes on the staff, or when you hand over this project, people are going to be reinventing the wheel. They're going to be wondering why you made the decisions you did. You may be wondering why you made the decisions you did. And this is where you have some documentation, and it's as simple as this. Like it can, this is a very complicated project, right? It could be as simple as this. Like, here's what I thought, here's what I considered, or here's how it's supposed to work. So that's the model. The next thing I like to do, that it kind of goes hand in glove with the model, is think about the workflow. All right, so I'm making this, and it's going to be 7 data sets or 12 data sets. How's it going to work? Are you going to do A first, then B? When you do A, does that mean you have to look at G? Who's going to do what? Are some people going to do some people are going to do the other? And so, again, there are so many ways to think about your workflow. Here are 2 ways that really worked for me. And this is part of the same project. For this particular project, it was about nesting areas for endangered protected shorebirds in Massachusetts. We were brainstorming what is the best kind of data sets to create. After a lot of talking, we decided maybe the idea would be to have a point data set and a polygon data set that represents the fencing. And it was complicated because the fences change every day in nesting season. So we actually gamed out step by step, how would this work now? So step 1 would be you would direct fencing. Step 2 would be you would GPS it by walking along. This is what it would look like as it grew over time. And then this is what it would look like when you had multi-polygons one after the other. Here's a certain field and how it would look. Just everything that we needed to do to think through this. And of course, this went through iterations until we landed on something. And that's the one that I took 5 minutes. Most of this happened on paper and pencil or something. When we finally had it clear, it took me 10 minutes to do this, but it's there as what we're going to do. Once we have this because I created training manuals for the entire staff that was going to go out and do this. And the training manual had, like the field maps manual that I'd showed you before. I actually printed those out so they had access to it in the field. It had a data guide that tells you what the different fields mean, etc., etc. This is another really useful thing. And for this particular project, because it was kind of had many moving parts, it was an annual thing. So every year, step 1, it starts with GIS, setting up the work area. Here are the point people. Here are the things that have to be done. As soon as the GIS project is set up, it goes to field work. Who are the point people? It's this team. What are the things you're doing? You're adding points, you're updating attributes. How are you doing it? In Collectron smartphones. Step 2 of that is after you've done the field work, you're coming back to the desk and you're cleaning stuff up and adding some more observations that you couldn't take in the field. There you go. Step 4, it comes back, like the team is done, and it comes back to GIS to close things out. We clean up details, do some QA/QC, back up the data set, and I started the business of putting it into maps and apps that you need. So for this particular project, this was the workflow, but especially when you have a lot of people and you're in the thick of it during fieldwork season, having really simple graphics can really help. And it helps to have it in this whole document that I call the schema document is really kind of like command central. It's where it's really a project management tool, but it's also a data management tool. It's also a data planning tool. So you have your data model, you have an idea of how you're going to be using the data and developing the data. This is really the thing. This is pretty much where it almost kind of ends is this is where you design the data, and please don't be intimidated by this. This is everything everything and the kitchen sink, not but and the kitchen sink. Really, you just need 4 lines to do your schema. This is where you design exactly what the name of each field will be, what you're going to be capturing in that field, what kind of field it's going to be, whether it has a pick list or whether it's just going to be open entry. These are the basic things that you really need in here so that you can go ahead and create your data. And one of the biggest values of doing this is that it gets you to plan your work before you've done the hard work of creating data, and it gets you ready to pilot it. And then once you pilot, you test your data like just outside your house, just as a test. How is it working? You will find yourself making so many tweaks, and you'll come back to this planning document and you'll tweak it. You'll say, I didn't even need that field, or I need 3 more fields because I forgot to describe this and that, and this has to go with that, or the pick lists have to be changed. This also is very relevant for the same reason that the model is relevant, that over time things change. And I can show you other ones I have, like my really older data sets, where if down the, well, here's a good example. This, when I first started, I had this field. It was decided to retire it. Um, but instead of deleting it from the schema document, I turned it gray, struck it out, and often I'll move it to the end of the thing, but I'll document the reason. Team decision, do not collect now. And usually I'll annotate why we took the decision so that down the road, you've thought about it, why you've discarded it, what it kind of creates a history of what you did with the data set. Other aspects, like you see so many lines here, because some other things that can really help is if you're developing this to be used in field maps or survey 123, both of those have the advantage of being able to design forms where certain fields are grouped together in these little collapsible groups. So it's nice to plan that here. And unfortunately, when you're doing field maps, you've got to, if you want to make the same form for 5 different maps, you can't just make the form once and copy it over. You need to make it 5 different times. So it really helps to capture here how you're going to be grouping the fields. And that's what this row 10 is the group. So you can annotate that here and save yourself some worry. There's a little tooltip that shows up for each field. You can do that here. There's all kinds of, like when you read it, you'll see this thing here is really important at some point. If you decide that you're going to make your data public, you can keep a record of which fields are publicly shared and which fields aren't. And of course, the pick list this is where you keep it updated. What if you put in a lot of time here to develop the field names properly? The other really useful thing you can do, especially if you have a complicated data set with a lot of different data layers, is you can use really simple Python code to create the data layers through Python. It takes like pennies on the dollar in terms of time, right? It's like minutes compared to hours to create the data set. I'm not going to demonstrate this here, but you have really simple directions here. Basically, all you do, say if I want to turn this into a data set, I would select all the fields that I want, I would Control C, and this is the sheet that tells you how to add. I want to add these fields. I would come here, right click, paste special, and transpose it so it's vertical instead of horizontal. And then I would just use I would follow these instructions to do what I need to. And this formula over here concatenates it into a line of code. And then as long as you've set this code the correct way, and you can just add as many lines as you have fields, and then you take this whole thing, you copy it, you open up Arc Pro, you open up the ArcPy window, you paste it in there, and you're done. You can do the same thing with and by the way, you don't have to use Pi for this. You can actually create an Excel spreadsheet, and there's a tool in Arc Pro that says table to data. You can also do it that way. I just find this super easy because I always have a schema document. And the video over in the thing shows you how to do this. So that is, the other thing that's really useful to do here is to have a cheat sheet. And I cannot emphasize this enough, that if you have, part of having the schema document is to really be crystal clear what you're doing with each field. This makes it good for you. This makes it good for data collectors when they're in the field, because field names can mean something to one person and something else to another person. This is in no unclear terms what it means. But then say, here's well, I don't have that cheat sheet here, but the fixture type, for instance. Most people who are doing the data collection are educated in this language, and they may know what a shoebox is. Some people may not, it may be fuzzy to them. You might want a little cheat sheet that shows them, here's a picture of a shoebox. This is what it means. And put that in their training manual, and they'll get the hang of it. Or the example I have here is we have this field called condition, and it's good, fair, poor, hazard, missing, and down. This was for streetlights. Can you imagine the confusion? What is good to you and what is good to me? So I sat down with the engineers and I said, and everybody had a different opinion what it was. Here's an example of structure type. There's a field called structure type. And there's all, or not a field, but there's all sorts of different ways that we describe structure. And it's really, people weren't quite exact. They were in the ballpark. But in order for the data to be consumed and to be reliable, because it's going to be consumed by somebody too, we sat down and we literally did a cartoon. Okay, this is what we mean by arm and fixture, and from here on. For condition, it turned out that, after talking to them for a while, it looked like they were thinking of condition in terms of the surface, in terms of the integrity, like whether it was leaning or not, the street light, and then the degradation level, which had to do with erosion and things. So we actually made this little rubric where we said, this is the pick list value. You will pick good if all these conditions are true. The paint is intact for the surface. The degradation is nothing. It's perfect. And structural integrity is there's no lean. But the minute you see a nickel or quarter sized spot on the surface, it degrades to fair. It doesn't matter if it had no rust, it drops down. Or maybe the paint is intact, but it's got a nickel size rust. It instantly drops from here to there. And it became so easy. And now what you have, there's that term garbage in, garbage out. If you're putting in qualitative data, then you don't have data accuracy, you don't have data reliability. So cheat sheets can really, really be useful. And I highly encourage developing those, keeping them updated. This schema document has grown over time for me. So I now have fields for project notes where I keep track of different data sets. I keep track of different apps that were made. I actually have a sheet in the schema document that actually has little notes on applications that I've made so that if they go down, I know how to fix them. So use this document however you like, but highly encourage, at the minimum, create the schema sheet. And all it needs to have is the name of the field, a description of the field, what kind is it number, text, short, and if it has a pick list, what pick list. So that is that part done. We're getting there. I'm going to pause to recording. So I was just explaining in a nutshell that just like the schema document helps you plan the data before you actually create it, this presentation helps you plan the data by thinking of the end users of the data or ideal users of the data beyond your immediate need. And that really saves time in the long run. It prevents you from going out and collecting data that you have not thought through well and then kicking yourself after spending hundreds of hours developing it because you left out that one key thing that could have really given you great benefits, helped you file a report maybe or make a dashboard. So definitely worth thinking of your end product as you're developing your schema. So that being said, that was the tour of the hub site and schema development. So this is what you do before you even do your schema. I will not be talking very much about mobile apps. Really, field maps and Survey 123 are the two primary ones. The reasons I think if you look online, you will find guides on how to take the decision for yourself. It was even in the search, it's used so often. I would highly recommend you contact somebody from the GIS office, or maybe you have a point person already who can help you make those decisions. To the best of my knowledge, to add this to my training document, to the best of my knowledge, the decision tree for field maps versus Survey 123, one of the biggest values of Survey 123 is, well, two of the biggest ones is, one is that if you have a pick list, if you have a domain list for a field, Survey 123 allows you to select multiple options and it puts it in the same field. The other thing about Survey 123 is for field maps, when you use it, you need to have the mobile app downloaded on your mobile device in order to access the map. It's literally 2 clicks, 1 click to sign in, another click to open up your map. But it does require you to have an app. Survey 123, on the other hand, if a survey, especially if a survey is shared for people to use publicly, you can just share a link with someone, they can click on it, and the survey pops up. You don't have to go through the app. Of course, you can. There's the Survey 123 app, and you can go through it, especially if you have multiple maps and you need to switch between them. So those are two big advantages on the Survey 123 side. The disadvantage on the Survey 123 side is it's like a smidge more complicated on the back end to create. Of course, it's also extremely powerful, probably more powerful than field maps in some ways. But it's a little more complicated to set up, and setting up Survey 123 creates a folder in your ArcGIS Online content. You meaning the creator of the survey, um, which you may never delete, or your thing will stop working. That, to me, that's the little that I know. In DCR, we tend to use mostly field maps. DCRW, water supply protection, are like probably the world leaders in Survey 123. They have taken it beyond the pale, how much they can do with it. One of the other advantages of Survey 123 is you can configure Microsoft Word documents to automatically pull from the data and create pre-formatted reports, which is unbelievable. And you do it through Survey 123. So it sounds like I'm really selling Survey 123 when I have worked very, very little with it. Field maps is my jam. But please make the decisions for yourself. Ask us for help if you do need that help. So we're going to segue now. We've talked about your license type. We've talked about kind of the pyramid and the hierarchy of, just 1 second, of data. We've talked about robust design standards, using the schema document, thinking about the plan before you do anything. Just 1 second, please. I'm just going to pause for 1 second. So we've talked about planning your data. We've talked about planning your workflow, thinking about eventual uses of your data so you can save time, be efficient, and design things better. So now I'm going to give you a quick tour of ArcGIS Online. The only reason I like to do a quick little guided tour is because I got a little confused when I was first in ArcGIS Online. So when you first log in, this is where your profile and everything is. This is a cool little app picker. So if you're going to be designing, if you need to create a project to be used in field maps, for instance, you would start by creating a web map. But the next step is you would go pick this app, a field maps designer, and that's how you would design your app. If you wanted to make a story map, you would do it from here somewhere. I don't see it, but it's here. Here, ArcGIS Story Maps. If you wanted to create an experience builder, which is an extremely powerful kind of app, you would do it from here. So there's a cool little app picker here. This is the primary ribbon that you have. Your organization is not going to be very relevant to you. It's all kinds of information about the organization that you're part of. And your content may not look exactly like my content because I'm the designated administrator. I have a lot more things available to me. Yours might look a little bit simple, but honestly, this is the view that you will be working in. I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, the content view. So what happens when you are given an account is that just kind of like when you have a Google account and you have your Google Drive, this is kind of like that. This is anytime you publish anything or you create anything in ArcGIS Online, it's going to show up over here. If you have a mobile worker account, you cannot own anything. So you will not even have a content folder, or it might be a content folder, but it'll show what's being shared with you. You will never be the owner of anything. So the main ribbon, see that little bar over there? I kind of wish they had a square or something around it so you can see that you're in. But a lot of people miss that blue bar. It's a very similar shade to the blue ribbon down here. So you know that you're an organizing view versus your group's view. So based on what you pick on the top ribbon, that changes your blue ribbon, and the blue ribbon drives what you see in the part over here. So I'm in content, and right now it's showing me my content, which again is pretty useful. Right over here, when you first get an account, so you just newly got your account, you will just see all your content, which is probably empty. And this is stuff that you own. This is not stuff that is being shared with you at this point, actually. I'm sorry. So my content and stuff that's being shared, that is stuff that I own. So a mobile worker will not see my content. They cannot own content. And then your root folder, which is really your basic storage space. You can click on this little plus folder icon to create new folders. I I implore you to create folders and organize your work, because I implore you, but look how much rubbish is in my root. All of this needs to be cleaned up. Really, okay, this one doesn't. This one I wanted to live there, but almost everything else can be cleaned up. But I've been fairly good about everything else. And then my folders are not very deep because, like I said, when my projects reach maturity, I flip them over to the official account. You should see that account. That's full of stuff. Um, but yeah, everything gets organized in here. And so I'm going to show you through here what is a good, let me, I think the damage assessments, which is the latest project. Oh, that's in the other project. Okay, maybe archaeology. 1 second, I'm trying to think of different one that I can. I think I'm going to switch accounts so I can do a better demonstration. So I've gone to content, my content, and I'm going to go to the damage collection project that I'm currently working really hard on. These are all the items. Now I'm going to show you what each one of those things looks like in the pyramid. Remember when in Pro we did a published web layer? That's what I did for this. When you do that, it creates two basic files, a hosted feature layer, and there's an accompanying service definition that it creates. That is that RNA part of it. It's like some little package that if this were to ever get corrupted, this is the RNA. I'm going to click on it and open it in a new tab. I could go to, there's a button over here that's going to say, well, it's saying update now, but I could say publish. Like if I deleted that, I could say this would turn to publish and it would recreate it. If I hit update now, it's going to recreate the data layer, but of course it's going to overwrite whatever I have in that one. So I will never do it. But it's something that you should, I don't really know. I'm not really sure what else you can do with it, but it gets created. So when you publish something from ArcPro, you can expect to see those two files show up. They usually have exactly the same name. You can then go change its name. So this is on the basic level, your hosted feature layer. This one doesn't actually have an example of a view. So let me quickly show you. Dcr regions should have that. Yeah. So actually, this is a really good example to show you. So the regions data, this is actually the one you were seeing in Arc Pro. This is, where's the editable one? I guess this has a view that needs to be fixed. So this is the editable data layer. And once it's published, you can always go and change it. This is called the item details layer. And this is a good time to say that once you've actually published your data layer from Pro, you're not really done. The minute you've published it, it is your responsibility to go fill out all this information. We have best practices. You received a link in your onboarding email with where you can find it, but you can also go to gallery and do a search for the word best, and the document shows up. And that document is what everybody in the EA org has to follow, those guidelines. But in DCR, I've set branding standards that are slightly different. So for that, again, there is a branding document that I will be adding to the hub site. Um, please just go look at that. That basically involves having a better, as you can see, this is not done yet, but it should have a proper thumbnail. And in fact, I'm gonna give you an example of. I'm gonna open this in a new tab. And I'm sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit, but I'm gonna now demonstrate what groups is because it's a natural segue to it. Groups are what you do when you want to share your content with anybody but yourself. So it's kind of unfortunate. Like, you know my ID, you just like me to do it, to see it. It's not like SharePoint or Google Drive where you can just add an ID and that person now has access. You have to first create a group. You have to invite the other ID into that group, and then you have to share your content with that group. So I think I tell people to think of it like having a door with a room with a locked door, and the door has a key. So it has a key code. So it's locked to everybody except for the people who are in the room. And then you put things in the room that you want that the people in that room to see. So I wanted to show you an example of a data layer that has good standards for how to fill out the item layer, item details for a layer that you've just published. So I'm going to go to the groups, and one of the groups that I put you in when I give you your account is this one, DCRS members. It would behoove you to go take a look at this because there's a lot of data here that could be good for you. So this is the name of the group, this is who creates it, this is what it's for. And if you go to content, you'll see all the information that's being shared with this. And I'm going to do a search for hardcores because that data set is nicely done. So this, and I think I put the link to this in your email too, probably. If not, it's here now. So as you can see, it's got, this is the DCR brand. And, you know, before I was showing you that there's PowerPoints that help you make these icons. So a layer view will be in orange. A hosted feature layer has a different color. They all have slightly different flavors. If it's the official one that's being published from our office, you can request me to make it authoritative. I'll make it authoritative. These are the different elements that I want that you need to describe. What is the data set? What are the attributes in it? What is type? What is the type of the item? This public non-editable view is based it on, and I've even linked to it, right? Because remember, this is for the public. They can't edit it, etc. What is the source? Schema. Here are the two layers. This is one of those two-layer data sets, like I demonstrated, and so on and so forth. So once you've published your data from Art Pro, you go here, you fill this out. It doesn't matter if you're the only one looking at it, but ideally you should do this if it even goes the next level up and you've shared it with a group, because other people may not, especially if you have contractors, right, in the group or people who don't know the data. It just saves a lot of trouble. You can actually look at the data, and this is pretty cool. You can look at, so this is two data layers, right? This is one data layer. You're actually looking at the attribute table here. Or you can look at it kind of in a design view when you flip over to fields. And this is really cool. This is a list of all the fields. And if you go to each field, what's a good example here? If you go to fence type, for instance, this is, remember the domains that you created for it in Art Pro? Here's what it looks like in ArcGIS Online. And then if you have one that doesn't have it, usually you're able to say add list. Oh, this has it already. Not sure why you can't edit it, but usually you're able to edit this list as well. Oh, this is a view. Remember, I'm looking at a view. The view is not editable. That's why I'm not able to edit it. But if I looked at this data view of the editable, like this, the editable layer. So that was the view, which is not editable here. I think, see how I have more options now? And of course, I can only see this because I'm the owner of this data. You would not be able to see it. Or, no, you would not be. You can edit the data in that you can add data to the data set if I've set you up for it. But this is messing with the actual data, which only the owner can do. You can create lists, you can add, edit, you can do all sorts of things with this. That's the data tab. Visualization tab is also really cool. This is where you can take a look at the data. And if this is where you can, say, for instance, add a filter so that the data is, you can click on one. This is a two-layer data layer. I can click on this one and I can change the way it's symbolized. I can change it. It's single symbol right now. I can symbolize it on a certain field. I can put filters on it so certain polygons don't even show up. I can configure its pop-ups so that right now it looks like this. It's going to show left ID, right ID. I don't want that. That's useless to me. And right now it's just taking stuff from the field list. I could just delete this. I could add dynamic text, right? And I could say type of poly, and I can pick a field, and that's what it's going to look like. I can go in here, I can change the colors, I can change whatever you can just do whatever you like, and you can embed attachments to it if you have images. If you have it, you can enable data layers to have attachments so people can attach photos or PDFs or something to each feature. That can pop up over here, so that's your pop-up. This is what fields you want to show up in the data set. You can label things. You can do all this on this level. And then when you hit save, I'm not going to hit save because I don't want to. What happens if I hit save is that now this layer, remember, lives in my content. It's this thing here. Whatever I save, the next time I add this to a new map, it's gonna, all my configurations are gonna hold true. So I won't have to keep reformatting that. Or I can just pull it into the map that I'm working with and make it specific to that map. I can change all of those. The other really important thing here, probably the most important thing, is the settings. A lot of these you saw when you were publishing the data. But if you skip something or if you want to change something, this is where you go do it. Enable editing. So this must, right now I've got editing turned off, but this makes it editable. This is where you make sure something is or isn't editable. Keeping track of changes to data, I recommend you look this up before you enable it. When you enable this, it adds a certain number of fields to your attribute data, and every time you can enable tracking editing and tracking creation. When you track creation, it creates two fields, and when you first add a feature, say if it's a point data layer and you added a point, those two fields will automatically log what the login ID was for who first created that feature and the date and the time that it was created. If you do the add an update, then it shows you who last edited the data. And I believe that means you may not have changed the point or edited the polygon, but if you updated the attribute, it'll track who last touched it and when. And that'll be on the feature by feature level. All of this is on the feature by feature level. So it can be tremendously useful. Much less useful if you're sharing an ID for data collection. Then it's pretty much useless. And enabling these does limit your options for certain things down the line. So for instance, I think you're not able to do an override if you have to do that. Something like that. I forget. You'd have to look it up. But I would read up before you decide what to do there. Export data is something that you want to turn on if you want to give your users the ability to export the table from an app. For instance, I think I have this enabled for the stewardship map, where part of that app that I built, not only do people see different kinds of data layers, they can also pop open the attribute table for some of the data layers. And so the Dcr headquarters, for instance, they can open this, and from here they can actually export this table, which is very useful for some people because now they have it in Excel. But this is not even something they're going to be able to do unless for this layer, whatever layer this is, you have to make sure that this is checked out. So that's kind of the biggest thing there. If you check this on, it means you cannot accidentally delete it. That's really good. Mark is deprecated. I think that might be only something I can see. But if you do that, then you get this little sign under here, and that tells other people that you use this data. If you've shared it with people, use it if you want, but it's really not the latest. It's a way of signaling people, right? Uh, this one, for instance, is the opposite of that. It's being marked as authoritative. So you have a great deal of confidence that this owner this is what it is. And as soon as you mark something authoritative, it goes from saying it's owned by to managed by. This is the organization who is giving it its seal of approval and saying this is our latest and greatest on our bit. So this is part of the best practices. So I think I've shown you everything there. So I've shown you the editable layer. This is a view that I made of it. So from here, which is a good one. So this is an editable layer, right? And I just have this habit when I have layers where I have different flavors of the layer. I've just got into the habit of putting editable in parentheses next to the name because I have made mistakes in the past. I've added a view and then ripped out my hair for half an hour, not understanding why my users can't edit it. So I think it's worth its while to put this in. But from here, look, I can create as many views as I want. There's something called the join view. It's more complicated. It's more advanced. I'm not going to cover it now. You can just create, you can export the data here. And when you export it, it creates another item in your content. And then you click on that and it downloads it to your desktop. That's how if you ever want to back up your data or something. Actually, this is a good time to mention backing up. If you have created data that is important to you, um, actually, this is great. This is segueing wonderfully. The other thing you want to think about with your data is whether you want to share it or not. If you want to share it, you hit the share button. And this is something that you will not see because very few people have the ability to share it publicly. But that doesn't mean all you have to do is tell me that you need to do something, share something publicly. I have my due diligence I have to do. I basically go and check that you filled out all these things. I make sure that nothing sensitive, and then I do 2 clicks and it's public for you. So we're just not allowed to give out accounts. Like very few people have the ability to do that by themselves. So this is the default by the owner. You can share it with certain groups. These are all the groups that I either own or am part of. So if I'm working for damage assessments, I'm gonna share that layer with with the damage assessments group. I'm gonna share any web maps, any web apps, all the dependencies, right? Like if I just share the web app. So here's an example. Not regions. Let me go back to damage collection. So if I were to show you the hierarchy of this, both of these are hosted feature layers, right? Damage points and flood areas. Both of these are the hosted feature layer. They're editable. There are no views of this yet. I pulled both of these into one web map, which is for field work. In this map, this is a map that I set up. I'm going to open it in Map Viewer. When I set up a map for field work, and basically it's as easy as that. If you want to create a web map, you go to map and create a new map. You can go to new item and create a new map, or you can start from the data. You can open up the data set and there's a little button that says add to a new map. There's so many ways of doing it, but basically you get to this. This is the map. And then you start pulling. So for this particular one, I wanted damage points and flood areas are my 2 editable layers. And then I wanted a bunch of background layers so people knew what they were doing, so that it looked nice. Um, uh, Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but a super quick tour of this is whatever you click on the left will change what you see on the right. So this is, I'm in layer view right now. I have this certain thing selected. I can go here and change the way it's symbolized. You saw this before when we were looking at the item detail. It's very similar. Pop-ups, fields, labels. You can actually go in and edit the data. If it's editable data, you can edit it right from here. Stuff like that. You can go to table view. You can change base maps. You'll see the whole list of base maps. A quick caveat for you here. If you ever use one of these, I don't know about the MassJS base map, but there's something called imagery, which is the Esri base map. That one, yeah, imagery. This tends to be the default that opens up, I think, when you open a map. One of the problems with this is it's really nice looking data, but as you zoom in and out, you'll see that the map changes and it literally will draw different maps at different levels of detail. And sometimes when you zoom in, I have been really burnt before where I've zoomed in to see details of something, and the details it showed me was older than when I zoomed out. Um, it was such an I would have never even known that that was happening because they don't actually put the date down here of what you're looking at. But as you zoom in, when you see things go from blurry to tight, it just looks like you're zooming in on the same map, but that isn't always true. Like it just looks like it got sharper. Right? I don't know if this is a good example. It's really nice when you see cars appear and disappear, or you see leaves were on and suddenly they're off. Because some of the more detailed imagery is more expensive data layer. It may exist for some areas, not exist for the others. So I've just gotten into the habit of telling people, pick your year so at least you know. And MassGIS actually, look at this. I mean, it's leaves off, which is, so this was flown in the spring or the winter. Um, but the level of detail is pretty incredible. And I believe they've covered the whole state. So, um, and then beyond the point, it won't even drop. But anyway, that's that. I haven't really used charts, but if you've made charts in your map, that's where you would find it. Legend, you save your whatever you've done, you save it here, and you can actually you can do change your sharing. Um, you can actually go right into creating your apps from here instead of going up to the app picker. You don't have a ton of options, you just have a few. But and I recommend you try instant apps. These are things that Esri makes for you, so you can quickly plug and play. But we're also in the process of developing templates for DCR. So you will soon be able to pick not just a brand new experience builder or a brand new ARC story map. You can pick one that's got the DCR colors, the DCR logo, that looks just like the stewardship map, but you can feed your own stuff in it. At some point, that's going to be coming, but right now, this is all there is. So yeah, this is your web map. You've done it. If you're, and then so you're if you're going to do something for mobile data collection, you start by creating a web map. You assemble all your stuff in it. But then you're not done yet. What you have to do is you have to then go up here, go to Field Maps, Designer. And again, I'm not going to go, this is a whole different workflow, but once you're in Field Map, you've got, this is just, it's showing me all the maps. Field Maps also needs to look at a map. This is yet another pasta box with a cellophane window, and it's looking, the spaghetti inside it is a web map. So you would point it to a certain, like I just went into Field Maps. There's, you would, not a good example. Oh, here we go. You would point it to a map, and I have gotten into the habit, and I highly recommend this, that if you've made a map for fieldwork, put fieldwork in the name, because then it'll be easy. You could have had another map that you're making for a web app, because there's a couple of quirks, like say for instance in field maps, if you add the same layer to your map more than once, which you sometimes do, right? You duplicate it because you color it one way, and then maybe you have a big circle on the bottom symbolized on one field, and then you have the same layer, you've made the circle a bit smaller and you've symbolized on a different layer, which is great, and that's how you want to see it in your desktop app. But if you do that in your fieldwork map, then it'll work fine for people when they're doing online editing. But if they ever want to do offline editing, where you don't have internet, you want to save the map to your device and do it, it's going to fail. So there are many reasons why you want to keep your field work and your desk work maps separate. Also for desk work, you might want to throw in a ton of data. And if you do that for your field map, then it's going to take a lot of time for it to load. When they download for offline data work, it's going to create. So it's good to keep them apart. It's good to give them a name, not the least because look how much easier this was, right? I knew exactly which one to go to. And once you're there, this is how you design your form. But this started, but this will basically consume your map. So that's my fieldwork map. No, do not want to save. So So going up the hierarchy again, this is my basic hosted feature layers. There are no views right now. If there were, they would have showed up here. I created a web map, which has both of these layers in it, because those are the two main editable layers, plus other things. And then I opened up web app, the field map designer, and created a form. When I created a form in there and hit save, that form got saved with this map. Then I went ahead and I made another map. And I happened to know that I basically made a copy of this map. When I opened up the map, I saved it, then I hit the save as button and I gave it this name. So it spared me having to recreate everything from the beginning. And then I went and added the extra layers I wanted. I did my duplicate layers if I wanted to. Once I had this desk work map made, I then plugged that into an experience builder. And I made a kind of app called an experience builder. I also made an operations dashboard. That's another kind of thing you can make. And I'm going to give you a look at what the final thing looks like. And then what I was able to do, actually, this wonderful person in our office called Grace was able to do is I asked her to combine the two. So what you're opening is an app called Experience, made with Experience Builder. This is what it looks like. It's got a splash screen that tells you how to use it. And once you open it, this is an app. It looks at this desk work. What you're looking at is actually this map, desk work map. But Experience Builder, that map is the spaghetti, and this is the pasta box. This is the pasta box. And I was able to configure it. Each of these things are called a widget. To the user, it looks like a tool, but on the back end, it's called a widget. This is the edit widget. This is a text widget that gives you help. These are indicator widgets, infographic widgets that report on things. This is a attribute table widget. This is another text widget. This is a button which opens up that help button again. This is a search widget. This is a controller with all kinds of different widgets in it that could help you. And here's the cool thing. When I click over, this is actually the dashboard. So even though these look like two different, both of these actually consume the web map. But this dashboard has been embedded in the experience, so you have a one-stop shop. When you click over to the dashboard, this is what it looks like. And this map over here is that same web map. So this web map is in this. So it's this dashboard is actually embedded in the experience builder on the back end. But on the front end, this is what the user sees. And they can interact with it and do all kinds of things with it. And you've made the thing. So I was telling you the schema document. I have something called a project notes document in Excel, which has the schema. Plus, I actually made these little like I have the whole family tree in there. Real simple lines that like for you to look at. Would you ever know that this consumes that? You wouldn't, right? So it's worth keeping in your notes. It's worth putting that, like we're still developing this, but it should really say in the description for this, that this experience actually consumes another dashboard. You want to keep things as clear as possible when you're developing these things because they keep iterating through different phases in their life cycle, and then you can just get so tangled up. But so yeah, back to the hierarchy. These two hosted feature layers are in this map, which gets consumed through the Field Maps app. This map has been opened through the Field Maps designer. A form has been created. And then when you save the Field Maps, it's being saved with that field work map. If somebody ever needs to change something, if a field gets added, I'm going to have to go in through Field Maps designer to add that field to the form that they see. If anything has to be tweaked, it has to be there. And everything, this is the package that people open through their Field Maps app. Then this is a whole different project. This also consumes these two hosted feature layers. But this map, in turn, is consumed by these two apps. This map goes into the dashboard. This map also goes into the experience builder. And then the dashboard in turn goes into the web experience. You can also share the link to this dashboard separately and it would work absolutely fine. So this is the hierarchy of what everything looks like here. Certain images that we're, like the GIFs, for instance, that we're using, or some images that we're using for this project also live in this folder. There are a couple of PDFs. I'd have to open it again, but these are help documents basically for people to use it. And as you can see, the branding is different. Dashboards of a pink thingy. We haven't finished everything. So this is a look at what your stuff looks like. This is like and you can see how it's being shared, right? So if I wanted to, this is the thing this is the tool that people use, right? I could just select this and say share and share it with my group called Damage Assessment. But if I just did that and sent it to them, they wouldn't be able to open it. Because you see the dependencies of this? It's sitting on top of a pyramid. This consumes this, which consumes this and that. It also consumes that. So all these are called item dependencies. They all have to be shared. And thankfully, ArcGIS Online is super smart. If I tried to share this with a new group, it would automatically tell me that, oh, it has dependencies. And it would tell you, and it would ask you, you want me to share it with these other groups? And you're like, yeah, sure. And it's done for you. But sometimes that can get you into trouble because sometimes you may not have realized who else is in that group. So before you do that, you should go to your groups, look at that group. I showed you how you can see the content of that group. You can also see the membership. And that, because I've gotten into trouble like that before. I've been like, well, yes, of course you can. And then I've realized, oh, shoot, there's a contractor and this is private information and they're not supposed to be seeing it. And so I've had to come out of it. So be a little mindful when you're sharing anything. Think really hard about what all does it consume. And this kind of brings me back full circle to why it's important to organize your things properly, to have everything that relates to this project should be here. Because otherwise you simply won't get the whole lay of the land. You won't be able to find things. And this takes me back to the tour that I was giving you. I'm going to not unselect that so I don't damage anything. You were looking at your content. It's content you own. It's super nice to use some of these filters. Favorites. You can actually see how if I'm using this a lot, I can hit the star button. And if I did, it would now start showing up in my favorites. This can be, right now it's like that's a layer, but however you want to do it. My groups, these are groups that either you own or groups that you're part of. Now, here's the confusing part. Remember that your top layer, you're still in content. So you're primarily looking at stuff, AGOL items, which could be a layer, which could be a map, which could be an app, which could be a PDF, blah, 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 blah. So when you say my groups, you're not really looking at all your groups. You're looking at content that is in groups that you are in. So on the left now, this becomes, if you want to see what's in the group called Chandra Troubleshoot, these are all, oh, look, and that's a web map, and that's a feature layer. If I want to see what's in the damage assessments, da 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 da. Now, you would think that you could just go to my content and do it, but what about groups that I don't own that I'm part of? I think I own most of these. Roads and Trails, I don't own that. I think David owns that. I get to see what's in that group. So there's many ways of doing everything. Living Atlas is actually pretty cool. This is Esri's whole world of all kinds of data and maps that you can look at. My organization is data that has been content that has been shared with the whole organization. You can see who publishes it. Like Jay Brooks, I don't know him. I don't know what kind of data this is. I might look at it, but I will probably not. I'll either contact this person or I won't use it as reliable data until I've heard from them. Mass EOEA, on the other hand, is really authoritative data. Mass EOEA is the data that you should rely on the most. Except certain DCR data, you should rely on this publisher. And you can go into the group called DCRS members and browse. You'll find a lot of, and you should probably book favorite some of those so that you don't have to search for it every time. Yeah, so based on what that is, this changes. So now you'll get it really quickly when I go to groups. The My Groups are groups that you're either part of or that you own. My Organizations groups are groups that are in your organization. Some of them have the ability that you can apply to be part of it, and some of them don't do that. As a creator, you have the ability to create a group. The best practice for that is to first search that a similar group does not already exist. If it already exists and it looks like it meets your needs, contact the owner of the group and ask if you can join it or if it's okay for you to share stuff to that group. Or if you need to create a group, initially I'll ask you to just run it by me because I might know of other projects and I might be able to put you in touch. We really don't want to replicate groups. It just gets really confusing. But yeah, this is so much easier. And I think with that, my tour of ArcGIS Online is more or less done. I also got a chance to demonstrate to you how, a little bit on how you can work with Map Viewer. I'm sharing, I talked about, oh, the last thing is troubleshooting. One of the things, oh, actually, no, the other thing is in content, I never quite finished that thought that if you have created a data set that's really important to you, you can select it and share it with a group called Civic Lens, DCRS item backups with Civic Lens. If you share it, what's going to happen is once a week, it gets backed up externally so that if anything goes wrong and your data fails, you have a backup. And once a week, what it backs up is anything that has changed in the last week. It just backs up the changes. And once a month, it backs up everything that you have marked for backup. It works primarily for data sets. It works not that great for operations dashboards and apps. You can try, but I'm not 100% sure that if anything fails and I need to get it back for you, I'm not 100% sure how well that will work. But you should mark it anyway, especially like I haven't done this, but I want to because so much work has gone into this. I'm not 100% sure how well it's going to work, but I want it to be backed up nevertheless. And so there you go. Every Monday, it's going to know if anything changes, it'll get backed up. Troubleshooting for you as well as for your users of the apps. It's if they're running into problem, this is the Internet of Things, and so much has to do with the cache. So things to do are to refresh your browser, escalating on an escalating scale. Refresh your browser, log in and out, shut down the browser, reboot your computer. In that order of escalation, typically one or the other of these works. In terms of instant apps or apps to use, instant apps are really powerful. There's all sorts of out-of-the-box things you can make. Experience Builder is the go-to app right now to develop your own custom app. It's got a bit of a learning curve on it. You can figure it out by yourself, or you can approach one of us in the GIS office and we'll give you a quick start guide, or we can even share our template. I'm hoping to be able to share a template for this in future so that instead of building everything from scratch, you can already have it half pre-configured for you. But that's the one that's really worth learning about. Story maps are also really powerful. They have a very different need. Story maps are more to tell a story. It's more like a slideshow and a nice presentation. Operations dashboards are really useful. They're more like an analytics tool. Experience Builder actually has many of the features of an operations dashboard. You can kind of build it in. So that's also good. Field Maps Designer we already showed. Survey 123 you can use. There's a bunch of other things. You will not see everything. Some of these you don't have subscriptions to, but feel free to poke around. If it feels like any of these is something that you could use or your program could use, feel free to get in touch with us. We will look into it to see what it takes to get you set up. The other appeal I have to everybody that I onboard into DCR is that I teach you all this, I do the overview, but at the end of the day, I'm not the one who uses the data as much. And I do a lot of app development, but not as much as you, the power user, will end up doing. So I would like the teacher to become the student. So I would love for you to keep in touch with me and share with me if you've done anything cool or interesting, um, so that I can learn. Because I actually help other people because I do this all the time. I'm onboarding people all the time. Also, if you have questions, please come to me because I know all the different projects that are cooking, and so most of the time I won't know the answer, but I'll know who does. It also gives me an idea to chase up, to follow up with you to say, so how did you answer that? Because somebody else is going to ask me the same question. So that is a great service you're doing to us. If you're creating new data sets, we really request that you let me or Nathaniel know so that we know what's cooking in different areas. You would be surprised at how much duplication goes on because, you know how it is. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And it's an impossible task. There will always be slips, but we would love to know what you're doing so we can help you do your job better. We also want to keep an eye on what data sets are maturing and are getting ready to be published through our office, through our account, get added to the stewardship map so all the staff can benefit from it in the same way that you will be benefiting from data that other people have. Also, please remember the stewardship map, which is the flagship product of our office. That if you have data layers that are developing that you think other people should get access to, that's kind of our clearinghouse, right, where we put everything that people need. So I think with that, that's kind of the end of the presentation. So I'm going to stop recording.